Automation nation, automation nation, automation nation, around the nation, automation nation, automation nation, automation nation, around the nation, around the nation, around the nation. Welcome to the Automation Nation podcast, the show for business leaders, tech aficionados, and those who are just simply curious about where technology and business are going. Automation Nation is your gateway to understanding automation, AI, and the future of business. Don't get left behind. Tune in now and subscribe for more. Welcome to the Automation Nation podcast. Bring it back. The show a second time around. Yeah, we got to get that one. It happened last week too, man. Intro likes to keep playing. The intro wants to come back, getting hype. Junaid, man, welcome. This is a conversation. This is our second conversation on the second podcast, but we've been having conversations for a long time. I've known Junaid it's interesting. Junaid Ahmed. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes.
I've known you forever, but I've only said your first name. So let me just get this clear. Yeah, man. So we met on LinkedIn years ago, and I remember how it all started with just trying to figure out because this was when video was just added to LinkedIn essentially, and folks were just started to come on board, and we got 2008 or so, right? Folks were just starting to come on. 2018, 19. Yeah, I went way back. 2008. We don't want to talk about 2008. Okay, leave that. we don't talk about 2008, right? But man, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But all this time, you have been building up your brand. You have been helping people transform their homes, their lives. When I say their homes, their home studios. You show somebody how to build their business from their home and look almost as good as you look right now. So if you're listening to this podcast, you might want to come and watch and see what this brother looks like, Junaid. I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed. We got some people coming in. Hey, I'm only talking the truth, or my nose will grow. We got Phyllis. Thank you. I'm 88. Hope I'm not too late to join. Okay. Never too late. Never too late. Loopy intro. Thank you. We're working on that. We're working on the loops. Sometimes you gotta jump through loops. That's what they said, Junaid.
Loops and hoops. You gotta do it.
Junaid is a master of home studio craftsmanship. That's what I'm reading off his LinkedIn here. If you're listening now or you're listening later, make sure you swing by LinkedIn, Facebook, somewhere. Check this guy out for sure. Junaid, master of home studio craftsmanship, enabler of entrepreneurial excellence. Okay, so Junaid is a name and philosophy for all seeking to elevate their home video studio game. As the founder and driving force behind Home Studio Mastery, Junaid has revolutionized how entrepreneurs, influencers, and creators think about the workspace. I just want to open up with that because it's the thinking about your workspace that is going to allow you to really optimize your work performance. And so, first of all, welcome, Junaid. I gave you kind of an intro earlier of how I knew you. I read a little bit of your LinkedIn. Now, why don't you tell folks who you are? Why don't you share a little bit about who you are, man, how you got to where you are today with this home, as a home studio architect?
Absolutely, Rob. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Super excited to be here. I started with humble beginnings. I'm a tech geek. I'm a tech head. I love technology, and I've been in this space of creating content for the web. I go as far back as 2001. I was creating websites. I was creating graphic designs and whatnot, and that evolution took me to designing mobile apps, designing enterprise level applications. But I always had a passion of photography. I've always had a passion for filmmaking, and that started leaking into my brand. And as I started building my personal brand, I mean, I've had my Super Junaid screen name since, for 20 plus years. And I was like, hey, that is my personal brand. And it wasn't until I started podcasting that it made more sense to talk about who I am and what I love to do. And as the pandemic rose, I started to combine the two technologies of being in front of camera and being up front and center, bringing all of the technology and all of the setups that I've had done for films that we shot. It's all about staging. It's all about setting up the shot to see or to show what people want to see. And we kind of see that when we are watching films or when we're watching a TV show. You have those typical shots. You go from one person shot to two person shot, and then they'll pan into somebody else entering into the shot or entering the room, kind of like that three camera set that you see in sitcoms and whatnot. And I was like, hey, that's really interesting. So I applied some of that technology, some of that philosophy into my own room. So I have a ton of mess going on this side of my room, down here, but you can't see any of that because I've staged the shot in my camera to only show you what I want you to see. So and I teach this to all of my clients in how to set up that shot so that you stand out and people are paying attention to what you have to say.
Yeah, that's important. We want people to pay attention to what we have to say, especially if we have a product or service we're trying to get them to pay attention to. It's super important, man. Today, this podcast is powered by Simply Automate, so we'd like to ask all of our guests this question: if you could simply automate one thing in your personal life, what would that be?
I love that question, and I'm a huge fan of automation myself, and I've added some kind of automations in my calendars because I live by my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening, and I've actually had to hack my calendar and hack my mindset with my calendar to say, hey, from this time to this time, Junaid is working on this thing. From this time to this time, I'm working on this thing. So I run on the calendar. So if I can automate something, is that anytime that I have a task that I want to deliver, I want to make sure that it shows up on my calendar as well. So if I'm using the reminders app and putting stuff in there, if I can automate that to say, hey, this needs to go on the calendar at the same time, I think that would be pretty sweet.
That would be pretty sweet. I think that technology exists. I think that exists already, man.
All right, let's do this.
I think we can pull that together. Speaking about pulling things together, man, let's talk about how you pulled this journey together, man. Like how your journey in video production. I talk about how we met, in 2018-19, but this started before then, I'm sure. And so let's talk about how that journey began and led to home studio mastery.
Absolutely. So it was my very first camera I acquired. It was a film camera back in 1989, and I've been taking photos with it. But it wasn't until 1996 that my dad got this film camera, this not just film camera, but an 8mm video camera that could shoot video. And I got really fascinated on what it was able to do. Now, fast forward to 2013, I had been shooting videos with my smartphones with different cameras and point and shoot and whatnot. But it wasn't until 2013 my wife got me a DSLR camera that had a attachable lens, DSLR camera that you can change lenses on. And I was like, okay, I've got this badass computer device. I want to learn everything that is to it. So I took
What
about
year was this?
This is 2013.
Okay.
So I took about 15 different courses on lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning, and different platforms on how to use the camera effectively. I took tons of courses on just understanding the camera, the philosophy behind it, but then also on Hollywood camera work. Like, what are the different shots that studio and directors use when they're doing when you're watching a movie. At the end of the movie, you'll see director or director of photography, director of cinematography. What are the terminology they're using to get the shots? So I took this Hollywood camera work class and continue to use that technology, use that video production. Now, it was in 2018, I was invited by my good friend to come up on stage to talk about mobile video production. And I had a little bit of success with creating videos using our smartphones, right? We're creating a ton of content. We connected through LinkedIn. We're creating video on LinkedIn using our smartphones and teaching on what it takes to build content. Now, I was like, hey, I know the ins and outs of video through the lens of a film producer, through a lens of a director of photography. How can I put this easily and simply so people can learn? So I wrote this little book called Mastering iPhone Video Production and shared this as a talk at this LinkedIn Live. Now, it wasn't until later I was like, oh, maybe I can record a little video course on it. And that took me into building my little home studio. But it wasn't until the pandemic hitting that I really spent more time in it. Because, when they say the grass is greener on the other side, it might be true because the guy on the other side is spending more time on that grass.
Yeah, he might be watering it,
So you gotta exactly. So you gotta spend time on the stuff that you want to grow. And the same thing happened with me. The more time I spent in my studio, the more cleaner and more level up I was able to do with it. But when I was traveling, when I was working and commuting, I didn't have enough time to spend on my studio. I only had enough time to work on my conversation, work on my speaking ability, work on my interview capability. So that's my little journey on how I launched and got into video production and home studio.
That makes a lot of sense. So you were like the Chinese bamboo tree, the kind of growing underground,
Mm-hmm.
And it's
That's
like
right.
for 5 years that thing's under the ground, and all of a sudden,
but
bust through. The pandemic was your bust through time.
That's
now
right.
You're gonna go 96 weeks, because you have all this time, and it was fortunate and unfortunate that all that time, because a lot of folks, unfortunately, that didn't use that time as wisely. But man, you used it very wisely, and here we are now. So let's talk about somebody, maybe a use case, somebody that you worked with in the past, a student, and they didn't know anything. I know people could come to you like, please help me. I have this phone, I have this idea, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to stand, I don't know about light.
Sure.
Right? Give us a story about how you help somebody come see the light.
Absolutely. The number one question people have is, how do I get comfortable speaking to the camera? Well, the shortest answer is with practice. You're not going to get better at running a marathon by just starting to run a marathon. No, you need to do the training. You need to put in the reps. We know Steph Curry. We know some really, some really amazing athletes that put in the time in the court to be able to hit that shot every single time. And we know Steph Curry spent a ton of time shooting those 3-pointers, and now he doesn't even have to look at the net to shoot a 3-pointer because he's got muscle memory, right? So you got to build that muscle memory to be able to be standing out in front of the camera. So number one, practice. Now, you've done all the practice. You want to make sure that you're spending all the right energy on the video that you're producing. Well, number one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're lighting yourself and not the background. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have a sun shining into the camera lens and people can't see you in the shot, well, that's not going to be a fun video for anybody to watch because they're looking at this bright spot in the light. So you want to make sure that you avoid, the camera lens avoids the things that you try to avoid looking directly with your eyes. So make sure you're not shining lights into the camera. Instead, shine a light directly on you, the talent, so that the camera can see you better. Number two, add a good audio or good audio device, a good microphone, because you want to be able to share. You want to be able to record your conversation. You want to be able to record your message with absolute clarity so people can hear you. Even if they're looking away and not looking at your video, they can still hear the message that you're dispensing to them. Because if it doesn't sound good, if it doesn't sound nice, they're gonna switch to the next channel. So
quick, fast.
lighting, get the camera right, get the audio correct, and make sure that your framing is also correctly. You want to make sure that your camera is angled or at the level of your own eyes, right? So if you're looking up at a camera, it's almost like you're looking up at your parents, right? When you're looking at little kids, and if you see photos of little kids, they're always looking up because we're pointing the camera down. So you want to make sure that you're looking directly straight to the camera because you want to be face to face with other people. The other thing people do is they have the camera pointed down and they're looking down at it, and that kind of is more like an authoritative view because then you're treating everybody as a child. So again, you want to make sure that we treat everybody equally. So make sure that camera is angled directly in front of you, line of sight, and people can hear you properly. Those are the simplest things that I've got.
That's good, man. And you so if you just tuning in or tuning out, Junaid is the guy who you can actually tune into to get your level up your home studio production. This means how you record yourself, how you record content, how you run your podcast, how you present your products and services online, how you present yourself, how you show up. So there'll be, I'm sure there's links you can give folks to, the best mics, the best cameras. Well, we're talking about your phone being a great camera, but you can also, give an insight. The best way to do that is connect with Junaid, or if you're looking in the show notes, you'll see links to his page, and his and access to what he's doing. Your podcast, Hacks and Hobbies. Now, what year is this in this? Because you started that a minute ago too.
Yeah, so Hacks and Hobbies podcast has been running since 2018. I've had over 400 conversations with guests on the podcast, and it's been amazing.
Goodness. What the heck? So you started this when I met you?
Yes. So it was April 2018 is when I started a podcast, and I was simply documenting my journey of being a podcaster, being a beekeeper, being a video producer, being a cyclist, right? It's.
I remember. Remember. Yeah. I was like, this guy is. I was like, wow, this guy is really messing around with bees and having fun. I'm like, wow, that's a thing, huh? I was like, wow. But after I watched it, I mean, and listened and investigated, I said, that's pretty interesting, man, what these P's are doing. And so, what are some key insights or your favorite moments you've had, while discussing entrepreneurship? That's a big conversation. Big conversation. What are some key insights or your favorite takeaways from your hacks and hobby?
Well, Rob,
I mean,
let me.
I want you right now. Right now, I want you to chat GPT over all 400 episodes. I want you to pick out, okay, the top three. Okay.
Well, Rob, let me level with you, right? Because you're a parent, and so am I. And being an entrepreneur is like being a parent. You're continually growing. You're learning from your kids. You're learning from the business that you're doing. You're learning from your customers. You're continually learning. And the podcast was my way of not just documenting the journey, but also finding the stories that were hidden inside of me, because this was like early 2018, early 2017. In fact, my very first podcast launched in 2012, right? It only lasted 4 episodes, but I wanted to go back and do the podcast. Now, I had 2 co-hosts, and I depended on them to run the podcast. But it was 2018, and I finished listening to the book by Gary Vaynerchuk called Crushing, and he said, hey, just document your journey. Because my thought was, I don't have a story to tell. I don't know what I'm going to talk about on the podcast. He's like, just document your journey. So as I finished my beekeeping course, I was like, oh my God, I could document my journey becoming a beekeeper. So that's how the podcast started.
What year?
Right.
What year was that now?
This is 2018.
Yeah, because I remember this. Like, I remember a journey of yours.
Mm-hmm.
I remember. It's so interesting how to hear you actually speak it. Well, continue.
Yeah. So 2018, I documented my journey. The first year, I didn't tell anybody about my podcast. I just recorded the conversations to myself about beekeeping. After about a year of doing this over and over and over by myself, I was like, okay, let me see if there's other people that want to talk to me about beekeeping, or maybe their hobbies, or maybe their hacks, maybe their life hacks, and that's why it's called Hacks and Hobbies, right? Life hacks and hobbies that you might have. And I then pivoted the podcast from being a solo podcast, solo talking about hobbies and my journey, to other people on how they took their passion to profit, how they took their passion and made it something that consumed their entire daytime job. So that was the pivot, and I started learning from them and started implementing all the things that I learned. So over time, I made the podcast tighter, made it more conform to what I wanted out of it, what people can learn from the conversation that I'm having with this person who took their business and they made $7 million in 18 months, right? How did they do it, right? So bringing those nuggets into the podcast is what started doing. So it's been a beautiful journey. In the most recent episodes, you can hear the journey of the podcast guests that I bring on, how they work with their clients, that they go deep into how they work and who they are as a person. And then we go deep into them sharing 3 hacks that you can implement in their lives. So that's become the template of how the podcast has become. And of course, you got to have a little bit of personality in your episodes. So I have 6 fun questions that I like to ask, which talk about pop culture, we talk about, hey, this is who I am, this is what I love to do. And it really takes deep into the conversation of what it means to be an entrepreneur. It means to be who the heck you are and just be that person. We don't need to bring in anything else other than who we are.
I like that. I like be who you are, right? And being who you are, be of service to someone else. Like, if you can marry the two, be you and be in service or be of service, dude. You win all day with that. Even if you're so-called losing, because I think sometimes a loss is never really a loss, as Mandela says. If you learn, it's a win, right?
Amen.
Nelson Mandela, that is. So it's I like that, man. I love your philosophy. I think it's a fantastic philosophy. You're teaching people a mindset and also a skill set. Mindset, ready, go. Not
That's
bad.
right.
Not
That's
bad.
right.
Nate. Man, all right, so we're coming in for a landing. Here's our second simply question for the day. If you could simply automate one thing in your business life right now, you got a magic wand, okay? You got a magic wand, you wave this wand, and that thing is automated. What
Mm.
is that thing that you would automate in your business life if you could right now, Junaid?
Man, I would love to automate content creation for my custom podcast. Right? So every episode that I have a podcast guest, I'm creating custom content, custom shareable content for it. If I can automate that, that would change everything.
Mm, that's pretty incredible. That sounds like a ChatGPT, Dolly, Journey collaboration, machine learning. Listen to the podcast, then create the images and the content. I mean, that sounds good. If I can say it, it can be done.
That's right.
Man, that's incredible. I like that. It's so funny, man. Anything you think of
Mm-hmm.
really, really comes to pass.
Yeah.
So it's like, how deep can you think, and then how sharp can you get your skills?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I love that.
So, give us this is your philosophy now. Let me see. We got our final question, man. It's basically, and it disappeared, but the question is, give us your best piece of advice in regards to automation or business. I mean, I think there's a lot of element to automation to what you're doing and what you teach people. A huge component, because we want to be able to put our lives into a place to where it happens effortlessly and we can be in our creative mindset. Right? So you really help them get there. But give your best piece of advice out for the folks listening, and we're going to turn this into a quotable.
Just get started, because the moment you reduce the time from your thought to action, just reduce that time, you will notice that you are moving so much faster than the people around you. This was the beginning of 2020. My cousin was like, hey, I'm starting a garden. I'm like, sweet. So I started thinking about starting a garden. 3 weeks later, he's posting photos like, dude, I grew this in my garden. And I was like, wait, what did you do? He's like, I started the garden. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't start mine yet. So I had to wait another 4 weeks before I could say, hey, I got some tomatoes and peppers in my garden, because you simply got to start. You got to sow those seeds in the ground. You got to water it. You got to do all of that, because thinking about it will not do any of that stuff. So you got to take action. You got to get started, and no matter what it is, there is a solution for it. And if you can't find somebody, if you can't figure out how to do it, just call up Rob, call up somebody who you think might know. You have a phone full of contacts. Just call up anybody and ask them, hey, do you know how to do this? Because I really want to do it, and just make it happen.
Look, you don't have to. What is it? You don't have to be great to get started, but you gotta get started to be great.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. That's
you
right.
gotta get started, man. Just take action. I love it. I love it, man. What's the best way for folks to connect with you and listen to your podcast and follow what you're doing and become one of your students too? I recommend Junaid to anyone who's interested in taking their home studio production to the next level. Anyone looking to take their live streams, anything you're doing video production wise to the next level, this is the guy right here. How do they get in contact with you, man?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere, at Super Junaid. That's my screen name handle that you can find me anywhere. If you want to learn more about the podcast, again, I talk about my podcast on all of those platforms, but you can look up hacksandhobbies.com to learn more about the podcast. Check out the new episodes being dropped every week, 2 episodes a week. We have new guests showing up on the podcast. It's pretty powerful. And if you want to learn more about how to set up your own setup, I'm actually running a 5-day home studio rehab challenge in January of 2024, January 15th to the 19th. Just head on over to homestudiomastery.com/5-day, and you can learn all about it on there. And if you want a just reach out, connect, and we got you covered.
Reach out. He got you covered. Nate, thanks for being on the Automation Nation podcast show, live stream. Home studio architect this guy is, and he will help you create some home studio mastery if you're looking to. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks so much.
Until next time.
Automation Nation, Automation Nation.